All right, so we're gonna add today some notes for the protein. So when we drew our protein, we have a carbon, carbon, nitrogen, and then we have a bunch of hydrogens. And then we have a couple of oxygen. And then they're all kind of linked together. This one is double bonded, that's why you see the two lines. Okay, and then down here in the bottom, we will see our, what we call an R group. So when we looked at our chart for amino acids, let me just bring that up right here. We saw this structure and we saw 20 different amino acids, and we were just looking at the groups mostly. But if you take a close look at these guys, you'll notice that they're basically the same except for the shaded part. So that's what we call the R group. They have the same basic structure for the amino acid, and then just that section or that bond, whatever that branch is going to be different. And that's really what changes the way our proteins are shaped like. So that is a protein. Let's go ahead and open this guy up and add our structure and function for the inside like we did here. So I'll put the function again. And then our structure. Okay, so last time when we talked about the structure and the function, we had both the monomers and the polymers that we listed out. So I'm gonna add that here over on this side. We'll start with monomers. And polymer. So a monomer is kind of like the building blocks or the smallest piece that will make up our structure. So in our structure for a protein, when we built it last time, we had the different parts that we kind of put together, and the main piece was the amino acid. Now, I'm just really gonna simplify this and just kind of draw kind of like a bead almost. We had kind of squares in our chain when we made it in person, but just an amino acid. But again, it looks like this guy if we looked super closely at it. But that's an amino acid. Okay, that's our monomer. And our polymer, when we link these guys together, we called this a polypeptide chain. This is the chain of paper that we made last time. So we had our little beads that we'll link together here. But this was our paper. So we had our little paper that we linked. They were peptide bonded together to show the amino acid. Remember that this bond right here is called a peptide bond. It's just a special type of bond for proteins. And kind of what this looks like when we fold this piece up, so we kind of make our chain and then we will fold this piece into, so there's our amino acid. Okay, then we link them together. When we did this, we just kind of taped them all together. But the last kind of bit, once they're kind of taped together, they like form this complex thing, and I just always like to show it as like this scribble. And it was a giant mess when we made this guy. So I'll just show you our protein that we kind of folded together. It just is this shape that's just kind of funky, and it's held together by the positives and negatives that are kind of holding themselves together, and then the non-polar pieces are found in the middle. So that's a protein. So I just like to show it as a glob, because when we truly look at one of these guys, which I'll show you a picture later on, it looks like a glob. So that's kind of what the structure of a protein looks like. Let's take a look at the function. Okay. Now, part of the reason we eat protein is because it gives our body structure. So think of your muscles. And your muscles are made of proteins. Your hair is made of proteins. Your fingernails are made of protein. Basically, everything in our body is made from a protein. So it's what gives us our structure and our shape. The next function of a protein is that it's actually one of the last sources of energy. So it's one of the last sources of energy in our body. So we don't like to use our muscle in our body as energy. We don't break down the small bonds to get energy. So our body will typically use our carbohydrates first, break those down. Then, we haven't got to it yet, but it'll use our fat storages next, so it'll start to eat the fat. And this is like one of the last, not the very, very last, but one of the last sources of energy in our body. So when your body needs energy and it's not getting it from either fat or carbs, then it will actually start to eat away at the muscle. So this is kind of scary. This is why sometimes people will lose muscle weight because it starts to use that muscle as energy. Another function is enzymes. We're going to go into more detail on enzymes in a little bit, but we talked about a couple of these. So here's a couple examples. Lactase is an example. Remember that this ends in ase. That's super important. This breaks down lactose. We have catalase, also ends in ase. And these are always named after the thing that they're breaking down. So this one was named after lactose. Catalase was named after the sugar that it's breaking down in your mouth. This is kind of found in your mouths at all times. You have catalase, and it's the enzyme that will start breaking things down in your mouth. So you start digesting before it actually hits your stomach. And there's several others, and they're always named after what they're breaking down. So lactase is named after lactose because it breaks down the sugar. We have a couple of food examples that we talked about, like over here. So I'll just draw my little box again. So this is fish, nuts, meat, eggs, beans. There's so many. Tofu. So even if you're a vegetarian, you can still get your source of protein from somewhere. But these are kind of some main examples of proteins. Okay, and the last bit that you need to know is that the R group will determine the function. This is super important because everything else is the same on the molecule. So by changing just different things about this last branch, it will determine how it folds, and by how it folds, it will change what it does. Or even if it exists. Sometimes if it's missing a amino acid, it will be folded wrong and it won't work. It's just a problem. This is what happens with people who have lactose intolerance. We talked about this a little bit. There's an enzyme, the lactase enzyme, They have one letter difference that's causing this to break down, that's causing this knot to be made. So kind of scary if one of these is wrong, because it will change the whole entire function. So I know that's a lot of information, but hopefully that gives you just a recap on the protein.